Welcome back to part 2 of this push button tutorial. In last video we created this little panel we have lying on the ground here in 3D Studio Max. And one thing I just noticed here is that it's pretty square, as we can see here, and we might want to make this seem a little bit more round, and we might just want to ignore this because it's going to be very small. Right now it's pretty big. Sorry. That. So let's go back to 3D Studio Max and switch to the top view. That's the right view, the top view. And let's create another cylinder here. So I'm just going to create a cylinder like this. And let's go to the perspective view, because really I should align this up so it's pretty much straight on top. So I'm going to zero this out and zero this out. It's going to make sure that it's right on top of this the panel itself. Right. So maybe in this case for my button panel, I want to change a little bit of color just to make it a little bit lighter, since right now I can't really see anything. So I want to scale up my button cylinder. That's not the right one. This one, to fit with the border. And for now I'm not going to worry too much about how much is going to stick in to the panel itself. I'm just gonna put it at somewhere around here. So it's gonna be a pretty hefty button here. And I'm gonna give it a different material, just because it's gonna look nice. This is, I guess, not really needed. So I'm gonna give it a red color and assign that. And there we go. So if you are happy with this result here, you can just export this one as well, since it is going to be a very small button. But since I wanted to practice a little bit with 3D Studio Max, I'm adding edit poly here. I'm going to make the rounding a little bit, make a little bit of rounding on the top here as well. So let's switch to gonna expand this one. You can always see which mode I'm in here by looking at this icon here, but I'm in the polygon mode right now. And what I want to do is to insert this, inset this top face a little bit like this, and that's going to allow it to go upwards a little bit. And I'm going to make another one which is going to be a little bit further in, where it's supposed to be going down a little bit and then maybe up a little bit. So I'm going to make a few of these here so I can work with these. And let's take the outer one here. Whoops. So I'm going to switch to edge mode and ring select that. Loop select, sorry. I'm just going to pull this up a little bit. We can see this from the side. It's going to be pulled up just a tiny bit. And I'm going to ring select this and whoops. Loop. That was the wrong button. Great. Loop and loop. I'm going to select the two inner ones, and I'm gonna pull them down a little bit, and then the one at the middle here, I believe, which is currently a bit hard to see, because I have back facing on, which is really bad for me at this point here. So what I struggled a little bit with in the beginning was when I wanted to select, let's say, these two edges. What would happen sometimes was that I would accidentally get some additional edges selected like this one. because I kept forgetting I had what the heck is it? I should put a hotkey to this because I shouldn't really spend time on trying to find. Oh, it's at the top. Ignore backfacing. Great. So that allows me to select everything at the top, but not get anything at the bottom. So anyway, I'm gonna take this middle one here, and I'm gonna pull that up a little bit, like this, something like that. And like before, I'm gonna take this, the middle part here, since there's a huge n-gon right now. I'm gonna take this and insert this all the way like this, and switch to vertex mode and select all the vertices here and weld them together to one vertex. You can see here now I have only one vertex. So that created me a little button here with some curvature or whatever you will call it, a little bit of detail. And you could go nuts with this really, but I'm not gonna do that. Just gonna try and create what I already did. So for now, I'm gonna call this button. And at this point, I'm gonna save this as a file, so I can get back to this and refine it if I want to. Button panel, and I'm gonna save this as a max file so I can get everything in here. So let's export this button here as well. Export selected, and call this the button, and minimize this, and then import the button as well. Okay, now we have the red button here as well, and we could also just drag this one in and try to position that on top of this, and this is going to be a little bit difficult. So what we're going to do instead is to create, let's delete this one, is create a new blueprint of a class actor and call this the push button, and open that up. We have a default scene root right now. I don't like this one in particular, so I'm going to create a different one. What's it called? Blackboard or something. Keep forgetting the name. Oh, there's the one with the little dragon head. It's a billboard. There we go. This one, the reason why I like this one better is because it's you can just hide it like this. And the cool thing about having a nice root here is that you can scale things easily up and down. So anyway, I'm gonna add a mesh, static mesh here, and gonna copy that. And this one is gonna be the panel, and this one is gonna be that button. Okay, so up here, find the panel and find the button. There we go. So now these two guys here are put on top of each other, and I'm gonna compile that, and we can now drag this one in here instead. And what I meant by doing this inside Unreal was I'm just gonna put it up like this. So this allows us to put these guys here as a separate entity inside the engine, and since we want to animate the button as well eventually, this is a good way of putting things together. Okay. What we could do also is to take this and scale it down a little bit, since this might not be the size that we want. Maybe we want this to be a little bit smaller, like this. But instead of resizing it out here, I put it down to half size here. I think it's better to just do it on the billboard here. So that's going to take care of, whoopsies, 5, like that. That's going to make sure that whenever we drag in a new button, it's going to have that default size. And since I'm always turning it as well, what we can also do in here is to select these two and also turn them in here. So right now I need to figure out which way is what. I am not entirely sure, so I'm just gonna, I had a feeling that was the wrong way. So I want to swing it the other way around in this case, because this is just for the setup here. I'm doing this. In another scenario, you might not want to worry about too much about this. But for now, this allows us to put this in here and create a little button here. So I'm not going to spend more time on this part here for now, because eventually we're going to take this a bit apart again. Just going to show how we can pull things in pretty easily, and actually also illustrate how I like to work with things when I do this stuff here. Before I do anything further, what I might want to do here is to take my materials, which is also imported, and rename them. So I'm going to call this button panel, and this one is going to be the M, and like this. Okay, and you might want to be tempted to leave these things out to begin with, and I did that most of the time, but what will tend to happen is that you end up having too many of them, and at some point you will end up having so many of them you can't really figure out what is what, and it's going to take a huge amount of time to get it sorted out. So I can highly recommend to get these things sorted out right at the beginning, so we just have a little bit of structure of your things. Also do this even though it's just a proof of concept or something which you will not necessarily be using as a complete project, but if you're going to be using parts of it, you don't want to have all kinds of default materials floating around and default names with bad names and stuff. So when you want to merge them together, it's going to be hard to figure out what is what came from where, and so on. I hope this makes sense. It's just a nice little workflow tip. All right. So the next thing we should start looking at is to create this spaghetti part here. I'm gonna put this on my other screen so I can take a look at it whenever I forget what I did. Basically, what we want to create here is a way of being able to decide which button we're looking at. And as I mentioned in the previous video, I did cover this already in a very early video, but I spent a lot of time in this video, showing how we could refactor this in a very nice manner. And frankly, I think it's better to just show the raw version of how to create this. Okay. So the first thing we might want to do here is to create a base class. So right now we have a push button, and the push button is a specialized class really, because it's if you view this as interactable, this is just a specific version of an interactable item. So I'm gonna create a new class here, called this interactable, and let's open that one up. And also for this one, add what was it called? Shit, forgot it again. Dragon guy. The billboard. Okay, I gotta remember that. Okay, and then drag it up here. And collision, sphere collision. So okay, so if we open this guy up here, our interactable, and just put it right now on top of one of the buttons here. This area within the sphere is going to be used to say when we want to be able to interact with this button here. So if we are outside this one, we don't care about this button at all. We don't really have to deal with this. So that's just a way of detecting if we're within reach of this button here. So I'm gonna give this a slightly bigger radius. You don't want to be giving it too big of a radius, because you don't want to have, if it went all the way out here and you could interact with it, his arms wouldn't be able to reach the button. So it's going to be looking silly. So find a suitable radius for this collision sphere here. Okay. And the way we want to tell our character that we are interacting with it is really to use the begin and end overlap. So select the collision sphere here, and you can see there's a component begin overlap and end overlap. So add one for this one and add one for this one. So that gives us these two event handlers here, so they're going to fire. And the other actor is going to be the player most of the time, and unless you have a pawn running around or an AI or something else, then this is usually going to be your character. So this one is the one we want to tell that we overlapped. So we want to tell our character Blueprint that we are here. And the way I'm going to be doing this is by using, because I'm not really entirely sure that I could just go ahead and type cast to third person character. That would be perfectly all right, and then do something with this like that. Might actually just work like that. But that means that it's only going to be the third person character Blueprint that will be able to interact with this. And in case it is, then this is perfectly fine. So just make a mental note of that. So whenever I start talking about an interface, you can basically just ignore that in case you don't plan on using this with other types. So right click here and say under blueprints and create a blueprint interface. And we can call this the Interactable. And in here we want to define two functions. One is called set register and interactable. So this is going to be used to register that we exist, and also when we leave the area, we're going to have a similar one called interactable. So we want to register and unregister self at the third person character. And this is going to be needing an input of some sort. And the input is going to be the base class. It's going to be the interactable. It could be any, let's see, not an integer. This interactable reference. And the same one with this one. New, okay, and let's give it a name. Okay, so let's compile that, and we can close it up. This is a good time to save as well. So what we need to do now is to go to our interactable here, and instead of the cast, well, what we want to do here is really call a function register interactable. And as you can see, it shows up, but it shows up as interactable. So if I make this call here, register interactable, it's going to take this one and say who is the interactable. Well, that's ourselves. So we're going to say that we ourselves as an interactable, we want to register as ourselves to be within reach of the third person character. So that's one way you could really do this in case you're only going to be using this with the third person character. But instead you can go into your class defaults under interfaces here and add the interactable here like that and compile. So what that does is we can now eliminate this cast here, specific cast. And so this is going to be generalizing this really. And it's going to, what we can do now is just say other actor into the target here. And similarly down here, other actor, unregister. And what you, this might have happened a little bit too fast. What you want to be make sure you have here is the one saying message. So this is basically sending a message to whoever is in the other end of this pin that we want to unregister ourselves. So in case the other one, actor at the other end, does not implement this interface, well, nothing is going to happen. Then this message is not going to receive anybody. But in case, this particular case, the third person character is now implementing this interface here. So that means that we can type in register. Event register interactable like this. We can see that it gets a special icon here, and event unregister interactable. And these two guys here wouldn't show up unless you have that at this this interface implemented here. Okay, so now we have access to this. So we want to have this information here. We want to save this, and since we can be within reach of several buttons, we want to create an array of interactables, and do that by checking this one. And when we register something, we only want to register that button one time. So particular interactable. So we don't want to be checking if it's the same. So basically, what you want to be using here when you add it, because you can add to an array, but you want to use add unique. Yeah, so you don't get this twice by some mistake, really. So this is going to make sure that this is going to be added to the array. Okay, and once we take it out again, we can do something similar. I'm gonna take this one down here and remove item. Say this one should be removed. And for now, that's really all we. Whoops! I wanted to straighten that one. That's really all we need to get this added here. Let's print out a statement here. That's always a good idea once you're debugging. So if you drag out from this one and plug this one in, you're going to get the display name. So let's do the same down here. Print out statement, get the display name, and right now I have this right on top of my button. So I'm just going to drag it out a little bit, and we can't really see it. But as you can see now, it says interactable at the top, and it says interactable all the time, but it doesn't say if we are leaving or entering that sphere here. So what you might want to do in this case is, okay, I actually wanted to save that. Great. Never mind. What we're going to do here instead is to type in append, just to get a little bit more informative text out here. Type in register and take the same blend and unregister. So now it says register interactable, and once we go out it says unregister interactable. Alright, so I think that's it for this video. We're going to continue in the next video by building more in this interactable setup here, and stay tuned for that, and be seeing you. Bye bye.